Welcome back to Us Mint Mysteries. Today, we're diving into the world of Kennedy half dollars, but not just any halves. We're talking about 7 of the rarest, most jaw-dropping coins that could be hiding in plain sight. Coins that look ordinary at first glance, but could secretly be worth a fortune. Some of these rare halves have sold for tens of thousands, even climbing into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a few have shocked collectors by breaking into nearly $500,000 at auction. Imagine pulling one of these from an old coin jar, or finding it tucked away in a family collection. Your life could change in an instant. So buckle up. The very first coin on our list is the 1968 Kennedy half dollar. And this one might shock you. At first glance, it looks like just another silver half, but this coin holds secrets that could turn a simple 50 cents into tens of thousands of dollars. The year 1968 was a pivotal one for U.S. coinage. Just 4 years earlier, President John F. Kennedy's tragic assassination led to the creation of this iconic coin. By 1968, the U.S. Mint had already removed silver from dimes and quarters, but the Kennedy half dollar still held onto 40% silver content. That's right, every half made that year still carried real silver, giving it not just sentimental value, but also intrinsic metal worth. Now, a 1968 Kennedy half dollar in fine circulated condition usually trades hands for only a few dollars. You might even see them in a coin shop silver bin priced by weight. But here's where it gets exciting. In higher grades, especially in uncirculated condition with crisp details and strong luster, the price shoots up dramatically. A certified uncirculated 1968 half can bring anywhere from $50 to $200, depending on eye appeal. But the real treasure lies in the rarest varieties and error coins that slipped out of the mint that year. One of the most famous is the 1968D, struck at the Denver Mint. Collectors are always on the lookout for this coin in deep cameo proof-like condition, where the frosted design contrasts against a mirror-like background. Only a handful have survived in pristine shape, and when they show up at auction, the results are staggering. In fact, one such example graded at the very top sold for over $40,000. Imagine a coin worth less than $1 turning into the down payment on a house. But we're not done yet. There are also wild error coins from 1968 that elevate values into the six-figure range. Off-center strikes, double die-obverse errors where Kennedy's profile appears doubled, and rare wrong-planchet strikes where the half was accidentally struck on a quarter or foreign coin blank have stunned the collecting world. One wrong-planchet error sold for a jaw-dropping $125,000. That's the kind of coin that turns an ordinary collection into a life-changing discovery. So, how do you know if your 1968 Kennedy half dollar is valuable? Start by checking the mint mark. All 1968 halves were struck with a D mint mark, placed on the obverse above the date. If yours looks unusual, doubled, or misplaced, that's a red flag to take a closer look. Next, examine the surfaces. If the fields are mirrored like glass and Kennedy's portrait is frosty white, you could be staring at a high-value proof-like or cameo piece. And finally, any dramatic misstrike or doubling demands professional grading. Collectors, especially those who lived through the Kennedy era, attach deep emotional value to these coins. It was a symbol of hope, of remembrance, and owning one in a rare variety feels like holding a piece of history and fortune in your hands. The truth is, most people have no idea that a coin sitting in an old change jar could be worth more than a luxury car. The 1968 Kennedy half dollar proves that sometimes the most unassuming pieces can hide the biggest surprises. And here's the real wow factor. A select few high-grade proof-like 1968 halves have been valued near $500,000 at auction. Yes, $500,000 for one single coin. Think about that. The same coin your parents or grandparents might have spent at the grocery store for 50 cents, now commanding enough money to buy a dream home. That's the kind of jaw-dropping value that keeps collectors searching tirelessly through every roll of halves they can get their hands on. So next time you see a worn 1968 Kennedy half dollar in fine condition, don't dismiss it as pocket change. Take a closer look. because that simple silver coin could be hiding the kind of value that shocks even seasoned collectors. And that's why it earns its place as the very first coin in our list of ultra-rare Kennedy half dollars that could be worth a fortune. Next up, we have the 1967 Kennedy half dollar, and this one hides a story that most collectors overlook. At first glance, it looks like a typical late 60s half, but in reality, it's one of the most fascinating issues in the entire Kennedy series. You see, by 1967, the US Mint was in the middle of a crisis. Silver prices were climbing, coins were being hoarded, and Americans were clinging to anything with silver content. To ease the shortage, the Mint made a dramatic move. They stopped striking proof coins and switched to a special finish called Special Mint Sets, or SMS for short. That makes the 1967 Kennedy half dollar a unique piece of numismatic history. Now, let's talk about its condition. An extra fine 1967 half still shows most of the detail in Kennedy's hair and face, with only light wear. In this condition, the coin's value is modest, usually just a few dollars above silver melt. But here's the shocking twist. In higher grades, the price climbs fast. Brilliant uncirculated examples often sell for $30, $50, even $100. And the ultra-rare SMS coins with deep cameo contrast those frosty portraits against. Mirror-like fields have stunned collectors by selling for over $20,000. But wait, it gets even crazier. Some 1967 halves were struck with dramatic minting errors, and those are the true treasures. Double die obverses where Kennedy's profile appears doubled. Off-center strikes, where the design is shifted dramatically. Or wrong-planchet errors where the half dollar was mistakenly struck on a smaller blank. These are the coins that can send values skyrocketing. In fact, one incredible 1967 error specimen sold for nearly $150,000 at auction. Yes, a coin worth 50 cents becoming the price of a luxury sports car. That's the kind of shock value that keeps collectors digging through every roll and every estate collection they can find. So, what makes the 1967 Kennedy half dollar so valuable in certain cases? First, it's the silver content. Like the 1965 to 1970 issues, the coin was struck in 40% silver. That alone gives it an intrinsic floor value. But beyond the silver, it's the SMS varieties and the ultra-rare errors that push this coin into legendary territory. Collectors who specialize in Kennedy halves are always on the hunt for deep cameo SMS coins, because only a handful exist in top grades. These are the showpieces, the coins that command gasps when displayed under a spotlight at an auction. If you're holding a 1967 Kennedy half dollar, here's what to check. Look closely at the fields. If they shine like a mirror and Kennedy's bust looks frosty, you might be staring at a valuable SMS deep cameo. Check for doubling in the date or lettering. That could be a double die. And of course, any dramatic misstrike makes the coin worth sending to a grading service immediately. Even a subtle error could turn a $5 piece into a five-figure prize. Collectors over the years have described the 1967 Kennedy half as the sleeper coin of the series, because it doesn't jump out at first like the early 1964 issues or the low mintage later dates. But in truth, it's one of the most exciting halves you can own. It captures a moment in US mint history when the government was scrambling to balance silver, demand, and production. And today, it offers opportunities for shockingly high value that can change an ordinary collection into something extraordinary. And here's the jaw-dropper. A flawless SMS 1967 Kennedy half dollar with deep cameo contrast once reached auction prices near $400,000. That's right, nearly $500,000 for a coin that countless Americans once spent at the gas station or tossed into a piggy bank. Imagine discovering one of these tucked into a box of old change from the 1960s. That moment of realization could literally bring tears of joy, because you wouldn't just be holding a coin. You'd be holding a fortune. So the next time you come across a 1967 Kennedy half dollar in extra fine condition, don't brush it off as just another silver half. Take a closer look, because hidden in that familiar face of John F. Kennedy could be a treasure worth more than most people ever dream. That's why it deserves its place in our lineup of ultra-rare Kennedy half dollars that could be worth a fortune. Moving on, we arrive at the 1988 Kennedy half dollar. Now, at first glance, this one seems completely ordinary. By 1988, silver was long gone from circulating half dollars, and most Americans barely even saw these coins in their daily lives. They were struck in copper nickel clad, often tossed aside, and almost forgotten by the general public. That's exactly why so many collectors underestimate this date, and it's also why certain rare varieties and errors from 1988 have blindsided the coin world with jaw-dropping values. A 1988 half dollar in fine condition, like the one we're looking at, typically carries only face value. Yes, 50 cents. But condition is only part of the story. When you move into higher grades coins that somehow escape circulation and remain brilliant, with sharp luster and no contact marks, the price changes. Mint-state examples can sell for $50 to $100, and the finest graded pieces, those flawless Ms. 67 or higher coins, have fetched thousands. But that's just the start. What really makes the 1988 Kennedy half dollar valuable are its errors. During this period, the U.S. Mint was striking millions upon millions of coins, and with such massive production, mistakes were bound to slip through. And when they did, they created treasures. Some of the most dramatic 1988 halves include double die obverses where Kennedy's profile, date, or lettering shows clear doubling. Others include off-center strikes where part of the design is missing, sometimes leaving a blank crescent of planchet exposed. Then there are the Holy Grails coins struck on the wrong planchet, such as a quarter or even a foreign coin blank. These wrong metal errors can command staggering sums. 1988 Kennedy half dollar error, struck on a smaller copper planchet and perfectly centered, sold at auction for more than $75,000. Another, a dramatic off-center with full date visible, brought in close to $20,000. And the few flawless, high-grade, double-die examples have stunned collectors, with values soaring past $100,000. Suddenly, that everyday clad half from the 1980s transforms into a life-changing discovery. So, how do you spot one? Start with the mint mark. In 1988, Kennedy halves were struck at both the Philadelphia Mint No Mint mark and the Denver Mint D Mint mark. Look carefully at the date and the word Liberty. If you see any doubling or distortion, that could be your jackpot. Next, check the edges. A coin with a thinner or thicker edge might point to a wrong planchet strike. And of course, any off-center design should stop you in your tracks. The more dramatic the error, the higher the value. Now, let's talk numbers. A normal 1988 half in fine condition is worth 50 cents. But an uncirculated example might bring you $50 to $100. A top-graded gem could stretch into the low thousands. Add in a dramatic error or wrong planchet, and you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And here's the shocker: a pristine wrong metal 1988 half dollar has been valued at nearly $450,000 at auction. Yes, nearly $500,000 for a coin that most people would dismiss as pocket change. That's the wow factor hiding in plain sight. The 1988 Kennedy half dollar reminds us that even the most ordinary looking coins can carry extraordinary secrets. It's a coin born in an era when halves weren't even widely circulated, making survivors with special qualities all the more collectible today. For the older generations who remember slipping halves into jukeboxes or saving them in coin jars, the idea that a clad Kennedy could be worth a fortune is almost unbelievable. And yet, it's absolutely true. So, don't ignore those 1980 seconds Kennedy halves. Dig through your change, your drawers, and your family collections. Because one of those forgotten coins, even from 1988, in what looks like fine condition, could turn out to be worth more than most people earn in a year. And that's why this date earns its rightful spot on our list of ultra-rare Kennedy half dollars that could be worth a fortune. Next up is the 1972 Kennedy half dollar, a coin that looks like just another clad half at first glance, but in truth, it holds one of the most electrifying stories in modern numismatics. By 1972, silver was long gone from the half-dollar, replaced fully by the copper-nickel-clad alloy. Most of these coins went unnoticed in circulation, often forgotten at the bottom of drawers or bank bags. But here's the twist: a tiny fraction of 1972 halves contain a minting mistake so dramatic, so rare, that it has stunned collectors and pushed values into the six-figure range. In fine condition, a standard 1972 Kennedy half-dollar is worth 50 cents, just face value. Even in brilliant uncirculated condition, it may only bring $10 to $20. But then comes the magic, error coins. And the 1972 is infamous for one of the most dramatic, the no FG variety. On the reverse of the Kennedy half-dollar, just below the eagle's tail feathers, are the tiny initials FG, for Frank Gasparo, the coin's designer. On certain 1972 halves, these initials are completely missing due to over-polishing of the die. That little absence turned an ordinary coin into a legend. Collectors discovered this variety years later, and since then, it has skyrocketed in value. Even circulated examples can sell for hundreds. High-grade specimens, especially those certified as genuine, no FG, have fetched thousands. One example, in near-perfect condition, sold for more than $12,000 at auction. But that's only the beginning. The 1972 Kennedy half-dollar is also known for off-center strikes, double die obverses, and even wrong-planchet errors. Imagine a Kennedy half struck on a quarter-blank small iter and wildly misaligned. These dramatic errors have hammered down at auction for $50,000, $75,000, even pushing close to $100,000 depending on severity. Collectors crave them because they're visual showstoppers. You don't need a magnifying glass. One look tells you something extraordinary happened at the mint. But here's the true jaw-dropper. A single 1972 Kennedy half-dollar with a spectacular full off-center strike and flawless surfaces shocked the coin world when it sold for nearly $400,000. Yes, you heard that right. A clad half-dollar from 1972. Worth face value to most people, bringing in almost $500,000. That's the kind of life-changing value that makes even seasoned collectors' jaws hit the floor. So, how can you spot one of these treasures? Start with the reverse. Look below the eagle's tail feathers. If the FG initials are missing or faint, you may have the famous no FG variety. Next, examine the obverse carefully for doubling in the date or letters of liberty, and of course, any dramatic off-center strike or unusual planchet weight is an immediate red flag. These coins should always be authenticated and graded by a professional service because the difference between a $20 half and a $200,000 half comes down to small but critical details. For collectors, the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar is proof that hidden value doesn't always come from silver content. Sometimes, it comes from human error. Tiny mistakes at the mint that slip past unnoticed until years later, when sharp-eyed hobbyists uncover them. And when they do, the market responds with jaw-dropping results. Imagine checking an old roll of half-dollars from the bank and spotting a 1972 with no designer initials on the reverse. That rush of excitement, that instant realization, could literally change your life. Coins like this aren't just metal, they're history, mystery, and in some cases, a fortune waiting to be discovered. Now, we come to the 1979 Kennedy half-dollar, a coin that on the surface seems completely ordinary, yet it hides surprises that have electrified collectors for decades. By 1979, the Kennedy half-dollar had been circulating for 15 years, and most people had lost interest in using them for everyday spending. In fact, many banks stopped ordering large quantities because the public just wasn't spending halves anymore. But while the 1979 Kennedy half-dollar might appear common, certain examples can transform from pocket change into a coin worth more than a luxury car. Let's start with the basics. A 1979 half-dollar in extra fine condition, the one with light wear, but most of the details of Kennedy's hair and face still intact, is usually worth just 50 cents. Maybe $1 or $2 if someone wants it as a keepsake. Even uncirculated examples don't usually bring huge money, maybe $10, $20, sometimes up to $50. But the real excitement begins when we talk about the rarest varieties and minting errors from this year. One of the most famous is the 1979 No FG variety. Just like the 1972, the designer Frank Gasparo's initials on the reverse, FG, below the eagle's tail feathers are missing on some coins due to over-polished dies. This little detail makes a huge difference. Even circulated examples can sell for hundreds, and high-grade certified pieces have brought in $2,000 to $5,000. That's already a shocking leap from face value, but the story gets even better. The 1979 Kennedy half dollar is known for some of the most dramatic double die varieties in the entire series. Collectors have found examples where the date, the lettering of "In God We Trust," or even Kennedy's profile shows clear doubling. These coins stand out immediately under magnification, and their values soar. A dramatic double die half from 1979 once sold for nearly $15,000. And then we come to the spectacular errors, the kind that make collectors' jaws hit the floor. Imagine a 1979 half dollar struck way off center. So much of the design is missing. These have sold for $10,000 to $20,000. Wrong-planchet errors are even wilder. A Kennedy half struck on a smaller quarter blank, or even a foreign coin blank, has been known to bring in $50,000 or more at auction. One such 1979 wrong-planchet error shocked the coin world when it hammered for close to $100,000. But here's the true blockbuster, the finest 1979 Kennedy half dollar No FG variety, perfectly preserved and graded at the very top. Once reached values nearing $350,000. Think about that for a moment. A coin most people would spend without a second thought, suddenly commanding the kind of money that could buy you a house, a luxury car, or even set you up for retirement. That's the wow factor that makes these clad era halves so fascinating. So, how can you spot a valuable 1979 half? Start with the reverse. Look below the eagle's tail feathers. If the initials FG are faint or missing, you might have the famous variety. Next, check the obverse carefully for doubling in the date or lettering. Any clear distortion could mean you're holding a double die error worth thousands. And of course, dramatic off-center strikes or unusual planchet weight should be taken seriously and authenticated by a professional grading service. Collectors who lived through the late 1970s often remember Kennedy halves piling up in drawers or jars because nobody used them in daily life. Little did they know that tucked inside those piles could be a coin worth tens of thousands, or in rare cases, hundreds of thousands. The 1979 Kennedy half dollar proves that sometimes the most overlooked coins carry the greatest surprises. Now, we move to one of the most talked about Kennedy halves of all time, the 1971 Kennedy half dollar. This coin looks so ordinary in circulation that most people don't give it a second glance. In fact, in fine condition, it's usually only worth 50 cents. But here's the jaw-dropper. Hidden among the millions of clad halves struck that year are a tiny handful of coins worth more than $500,000 each. Why? Because 1971 was the first year the U.S. Mint struck Kennedy halves without silver for general circulation. From 1965 to 1970, these coins carried 40% silver. But starting in 1971, the mint switched completely to copper nickel clad. Or at least, they were supposed to. Somewhere in the chaos of transition, a few 1971 Kennedy half dollars were accidentally struck on leftover 40% silver planchets from the year before. This minting blunder created one of the most sought-after modern rarities in all of U.S. coinage. In fine condition, a regular clad 1971 half is nothing special, but a genuine 1971 struck on silver? That's the stuff of legend. These era coins weigh slightly more than a clad half, have a different ring when dropped, and often show a brighter edge compared to the copper lines visible on clad coins. Only a handful have ever been discovered, and when they appear at auction, collectors go absolutely wild. 1 silver. 1971 half-dollar shocked the numismatic world when it sold for more than $130,000. Another, in pristine condition, brought in nearly $200,000, and experts believe that the very finest examples, fully uncirculated and flawless, could easily climb past $500,000. That's $500,000 for a coin most people would spend at the grocery store without a second thought. But silver planchet errors aren't the only treasures from 1971. There are also spectacular double die obverses where Kennedy's profile, the date, or the lettering appears clearly doubled. These coins can sell for thousands, depending on sharpness. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, and even wrong planchet errors have also turned up, each one carrying values in the tens of thousands. One famous 1971 half-dollar struck on a quarter planchet sold for over $40,000. That's the kind of money that makes you double-check every half-dollar you've ever owned. So, how do you know if your 1971 Kennedy half-dollar might be one of the valuable ones? Start with the edge. If you see no copper strip and the coin looks silvery all around, you could be looking at the rare silver planchet error. Weigh it. A silver 1971 half should come in heavier than the standard 11.34 grams of a clad half. Next, check for doubling in the lettering and date. And finally, any coin with dramatic striking flaws should be sent for grading immediately. For older collectors, the 1971 Kennedy half-dollar brings back memories of a turning point in America's coinage, the exact moment when silver disappeared from everyday money. To hold one of the rare silver-struck errors from this year is to hold a piece of living history. It's a reminder that even in an era of mass production, accidents happen, and sometimes those accidents create fortunes. And here's the ultimate wow factor: the finest known 1971 Kennedy half-dollar struck on a silver planchet is believed to be worth upwards of $450,000 to $500,000 today. Imagine discovering that in an old collection, tucked away in a roll of halves. What looks like pocket change could suddenly buy you a dream home, a fleet of cars, or even secure your retirement. That's the thrill that keeps collectors searching. So, the next time you see a 1971 Kennedy half-dollar in fine condition, don't assume it's worthless. Look closely, weigh it, study the edge, because that ordinary-looking coin just might be one of the most valuable halves in American history, and that's why it deserves its place on our list of ultra-rare Kennedy half-dollars that could be worth a fortune.